Due to the COVID situation, my game shifted from a local club to a regular apartment. But there is a pet dog tending to fart sometimes, and there's nowhere to run. A smelly cloud envelops the gaming table. It's winter now, and constantly ventilating the room is kinda hard. DM is trying to provide at least some comfort in these challenging circumstances and gives players a bonus. If you're smelling a dog's fart, you'll get an additional 1d4 bonus damage on your next attack roll. Consequence: power gamers are now actually actively trying to smell the dog's farts to get a bonus, not avoid it. You know, I've gotta respect the entrepreneurial spirit, the go-getter attitude to sniff a dog's farts to buff your damage by literally the most minor dice in the game. Dedication. I don't know if this is a horror story as much as it is just a bad experience that kept me from playing D&D in the first place. I'm not sure if it's really relevant to the story either, but I'm a woman, but I dress up more like a guy, and I've always had short hair, but at this point in my life, it was getting easier to distinguish that I was a girl. During my freshman year of high school, I joined a tabletop gaming club. I was really excited to try out D&D for the first time. In the past, I had really enjoyed RPGs like Skyrim, Fire Emblem, and The Legend of Zelda, so I thought it'd be really fun to try out a game where you interact with like-minded people and have a more imaginative freedom. Before I even joined the club, I had bought my own guidebook, starter set, and cool dice to get started whenever I could find a group. I filled it around with different character ideas and thought playing as a paladin would be cool, so I had my heart set on that, something I'd later come to regret. The first day of the tabletop club started off poorly. I learned that it would be a few days before everything was set up to start a campaign, but I was willing to wait. I had already waited this long, a few more days would not hurt, right? Wrong. While waiting, I had sat down at the D&D table to ask about the game and how to get started. The guys there said they were experienced players, but they weren't particularly forthcoming with any information. However, as soon as I said I wanted to try playing a paladin, they started heckling me. It wasn't like they were straight up bullying me, but they were definitely trying to put me down, saying things like, "Oh god, not one of those again. Paladins are so overrated. There are way too many people who play as paladins already. You're really starting off with a paladin as your first class?" You get it. Just passive-aggressive heckling. Usually that kind of thing wouldn't bother me. I'd just be like, okay, shut up, I'll do what I want. But I was brand new to this community, and being talked down to by players who were older and more experienced than me made me feel like I was being rejected and shot down before I even had a chance to get started. I wasn't, and I'm still not, sure if paladins have some sort of bad rap in the D&D community, but I didn't stick around long enough to find out. While the paladin thing did bother me, that wasn't the only reason I left the tabletop club. I still went to the club meetings after school, hoping that more people would join the group and be willing to help me get started. While I was waiting, I'd sit around with some of the other freshmen who were also waiting on the club to get rolling. I'd spend my time drawing, doing homework, or talking to people who were nicer. Most of the time, I'd just be doing my own thing and minding my own business, but from day one, this one guy, I think he was a sophomore, decided I'd be his regular target for harassment. He'd come up to me while I was alone, start calling me homophobic slurs. I didn't really know what that meant at the time, nor did I understand why he'd approach me like that, but I knew he was insulting me by his tone and expression. I wasn't the only person he did that to either, but it felt like he put extra effort into targeting me, following me around the room and continuing to harass me. Since I didn't know what any of these slurs meant, I didn't know how to ask for help. The only time I asked the club supervisor to do something, they told him to stop or he'd have to leave, but did nothing when he just continued doing it anyway. I wasn't openly gay, and I wasn't the only girl in the club, but he'd always go after me specifically. I'm guessing that he targeted me mostly because of my looks. As far as I know, I was the only girl he targeted. Anyway, with no visible progress in the D&D group, and the constant harassment, I soon left the tabletop club altogether. I ended up dropping out of the clubs I signed up for by the end of the year. I decided I'd rather be home playing video games anyways. Part of me really wants to try D&D out and look for a nicer group, but whenever I think about the tabletop club, I just get a sinking feeling in my stomach. I'm sorry that this wasn't really an interesting story, but I really want to talk about this somewhere for a long time now. High school. Man, I do not miss that experience. But yeah, school gaming clubs are where a lot of people start their D&D games. which is why it's so important to make sure that it's a safe space. Making sure that people don't literally go around yelling homophobic slurs and being the worst, it's kind of important. Not just in D&D clubs, but I think in most school settings, in all school settings. That kind of behavior can absolutely drive somebody away from an awesome hobby like Dungeons & Dragons, so making sure that your group is accepting and that the club is accepting if you are in a high school D&D group or a college D&D group, whatever, that is incredibly, incredibly important. This story starts when my friends and I, who were completely new to the game but always wanted to play, went to the local game shop to try playing a one-shot. One-shot itself went great, and we were excited to start a full campaign. So the DM working at the shop introduced us to his friend who wanted to be a DM himself. As a bonus, he wanted to run Curse of Strahd, and we heard it was the best module out at the time, so we agreed. First session arrives, and we all made characters with complex backstories as the DM requested. I was a warlock, and my friends were a fighter, druid, and barbarian. None of us wanted to play a cleric, but the DM insisted it was essential for this campaign, so he invited one of his friends to play as one. But he was a cool dude, so none of us minded. The beginning of the campaign is actually fun. We skipped the death house and had a couple introductory sessions outside of Barovia. Our characters bonded quickly, and we couldn't wait to see what Barovia was like, but things rapidly took a turn for the weird. The DM had an obsession with romancing NPCs and would try to force it on us whenever he had the chance, which wouldn't be a lot because this is Curse of Strahd, but he always found a way to throw an NPC at us every session. The problem is, 3 of us made it absolutely clear our characters were not interested in hooking up with anybody. The druid's character was married, and the barbarian and I wanted to focus on escaping Barovia, but that did not stop the DM. The other 2 players were into it, so we couldn't complain too much. Another problem was that these 2 players and the DM came and left together in one car, and during the ride, they basically have an entire extra session that the rest of us didn't know about. And we were told we can't ask them about it because our characters wouldn't know what happened. Fine, we thought let them get the romance out of the way so we can enjoy Curse of Strahd. Nope. Half of the sessions we were in were still dedicated to who slept with who last night and if they were pregnant. By this point, we'd played 10 sessions and still haven't met Strahd, or had any idea what he was like. The barbarian spent half the session sleeping in real life, and the druid brought a book to read while the DM rolled on the sex aftermath chart. What? Also, the fighter became a werewolf in the car session. It all came to a head when my warlock found a mysterious letter in a cave we just cleared of enemies. I was genuinely excited to read what it said, but the DM told me I had to hand it to the fighter. I refused, since it was my character who found it, and the fighter hadn't noticed, and I was going to be the one reading the letter. Turns out it was from the fighter's girlfriend, telling him she was pregnant and leaving, and that she hoped the fighter would follow. It was written in a way to imply we should track her down to reunite her with the fighter, but my warlock was having none of it. He burned the letter on the spot and walked off. When the DM asked where he was going, I said he was leaving. He can't leave Barovia, the DM said, so I said I'm leaving the same way the girlfriend is. We had a big old fight about that, and the campaign ended. My 2 friends decided to quit the game after, but by that point I started DMing myself and managed to convince them to play in my campaign. But to this day, they still think Curse of Strahd is a bad module. I love Curse of Strahd. Why is it always Curse of Strahd in these damn horror stories? Curse of Strahd is awesome. Damn it. To be fair, even my horror stories in Curse of Strahd. God, I don't know what to do with this information. I need to run a Curse of Strahd. Anyway, alright, we're getting off track. This is a great example of a major divide between players and the DM. The DM, I guess, wants to run a romance-heavy dating sim campaign in Curse of Strahd. That's awesome. If that's what you want to do, that's great. But your players, all of your players, need to be on board for that. Now, if there's one person who isn't on board out of 5, then we can have a discussion. Maybe you should talk to that player about finding a different group. But if it's half of your players, then maybe you might want to look inward and figure out if you, the DM, need to change up what you're doing. Because half of your players not enjoying your campaign, I mean, that's a big deal. Also, favoriting the players that happen to enjoy your playstyle and having private sessions with them, that's not cool. And not informing the other players of what happened, even less cool. Don't do that. Favoritism is bad, and make sure to set proper expectations when you're running Dungeons and Dragons. Get rid of that divide between DMs and players. This happened a couple months ago, and I've just processed the event with my friends, and it's been a while since I posted anything to Reddit, so I may just start off here. I am an artist. I usually draw anime-style characters and original characters like mine, creating Maijin Tofu. I made a Twitter page dedicated to her, and I got quite a lot of attention from fans since she was my escape from bad mental health thoughts. And, well, I can agree, some things I may draw are sexual or lewd. I am also a type that some would describe as an ooh-woo pink gamer girl with pink PC setups and fashion mainly being either Japanese or simply cute. After quarantine, when stores and social places were opening up, I decided to go out to town with a friend I haven't seen since UK's first lockdown. We visited some of our favorite stores, many of which shut down. I really wanted to get some figurines or manga, so I looked up manga stores on Google Maps. Google showed me a way to a store that was in a shady alleyway, however, it was brilliantly lit up. It turned out to be a comic book and D&D store, so I went inside to see what kind of things they had. Because I was very interested in playing D&D in the future, I picked up a few books, a player's guide, and a monster manual for fun. Once checking them out, the store's owner asked me if I play Dungeons & Dragons. I replied that I really want to, but no one I know hosts a game, so he insisted I join into his D&D campaign, asking me if I had a character sheet already made. If so, I could join in the next day. He gave me all the details and told me to text him over WhatsApp if I will be joining in. Well, the answer was yes. I really wanted to join in, and I had already had a character sheet made for a dark elf bard. The next day, I went in after the store closed with some snacks in my bag and feeling confidently nervous about it. At first, I panicked because the door was locked, but the store owner unlocked it and let me in, asking how I was and if I was ready for the story. Apparently, they already played the pilot of the story, so I'm joining in as someone who just came to town on their own and joined the group for the quests. The table was beyond what I expected. Customized board with their own buildings and figurines. The owner gave me a figure of an elf as a gift for me to play as. And because one person was not at the table and running late, I was able to introduce myself to everyone. Most in there were very friendly and respectful, and I made friends with a few of them. Some even told me they cosplay regularly and sometimes will make a costume for their own D&D character. When I was showing them some of my pictures of my cosplays and fursuits I made before leaving the furry fandom, the store owner, also the DM/Dungeon Master, got up to the door, and a moment later, large footsteps came down the stairs as it was the Neckbeard. Everyone went silent, and I sat down, unsure of what to do, as Neckbeard looked at us and then looked at me, and his look sent shivers down my spine, and I couldn't pinpoint why. He looked like a regular anime fan. He was wearing a black graphic t-shirt which had a kana? A character that is a dragon aged 300 years but looks like a 5-year-old girl. That's gross. Which made me wonder what kind of guy he is. He sat down at the end of the table as if it was his place before leaning towards me and bringing out his skinny hand to me, introducing himself as his name, but we'll call him Neckbeard. I laughed off the hand awkwardly and introduced myself as myself. Once the DM sat down, he started off the game, with our characters meeting up and going on a quest to a cave to find a missing royal jewel that the goblins have stolen from us. With my dark elf aiding the party with songs and poems over passing counters of certain people and mocking the goblins at the same time, midway we decided to take a small break. Some of the players went outside for a smoke, as I decided to chat with a friend, Krelith. I won't use their real names, this is their character's name. As we chat about anime and what we want to watch, Neckbeard's attention is immediately brought upon us when he was on his phone and joined in. I didn't mind it, so we chat about anime together. I mentioned that I like Dragon Ball and made my own characters. Neckbeard asked if I have any designs for them, so I gave him my Twitter so he can look through the art of my characters. He called my OC Tofu hot and a breedable being, pointing out that Majins are very stretchy and can make their... What? But why would that even occur? Why? Is this the ALO experience? I regretted giving him my socials. After the game, I left the store and went to the bus stop and realized Neckbeard was at the same bus stop as I was. We didn't talk, but I felt his stare going towards me as I was messaging my boyfriend to let him know I'm okay and on my way home. Neckbeard came close to me and asked if I was taking the same bus as him. His bus was number 23, and so was mine, so I gave him a nod. Neckbeard then questioned me if I had any more of that character art I drew. I looked at him and asked if he promised not to say anything weird about them. He said, "Weird? Like what?" He laughed it off. I told him about the breedable being thing, and he laughed at it more, saying that I drew her in that way with huge tits and tight clothing, so I should expect and accept those type of comments. So I told him that it is wrong to say that anyway. So I put my headphones up and tried to message my boyfriend to see if he can just pick me up now instead, as I didn't think the long bus ride home with Neckbeard asking about my characters and things would be the best. At the end, my boyfriend came down to the bus stop. I kindly waved Neckbeard off and went inside the car. He asked who he was, and I told him that he was just a guy who played D&D with me. Later on, my phone started to get a lot of messages. A message request from Neckbeard on my Twitter saying he is sorry for those comments and asked if he can see more of my characters. I accepted his apology and sent him a few, and he appreciated the art and design in them. A couple of weeks go by, our D&D party finally levels up to level 2, and at the end, we all went out to the nearest McDonald's to get some food before we all part ways to go home. Myself and my friend Krelith were sitting next to each other as we both thought of going to another town to do some anime shopping together, get some figurines and manga and other things. Neckbeard was sitting on his own in a corner. We insisted he join in with us, but he told us no, and mainly just was on his phone watching something. Before everyone left, I picked up a meal for my boyfriend and went to the bus stop with Neckbeard. I asked Neckbeard what he was watching, and he looked at me, telling me it's nothing and none of my concern. I jokingly asked, "Was it hentai?" And he acted out one of those nani moments in anime. "How did you know?" he asked me, thinking I may have seen it when I walked past him or something. I just stayed quiet and continued to walk toward the bus stop. Myself and Neckbeard stood at the stop. He asked me if I was buying another meal for when I get home. I told him no and said it was for my boyfriend for when he comes back from work. He then stood in front of me, being quite close, and placed his hands onto the stop's walls. I believe he was thinking that it will be the most romantic way, like in the type of anime he watches. He breathed down onto my face and told me that I was the most beautiful, kindest, and most talented person in the world, and that he wants to go out on a date with me. I told him no, I already have a boyfriend that I am very happy to be with, and he told me that I should just dump him and go out with the Neckbeard instead. He promises to be a better man. I still told him no, and walked out of the awkward position. He then asked if he can instead go out with my characters, that he can just roleplay with them. It will be fine, he said. I told him no, and told him not to ask for anything like that. Bus ride home was awkward. He still attempted to ask the same thing and sit next to me, but I was able to get out of the seat and sit at one other seated area. Once I got home, I made sure Neckbeard didn't follow me there. He still messaged me with the asterisk for the roleplay that he began himself. Once I got to bed, I checked the messages and saw that Neckbeard had blocked me. I scrolled through the messages and seemed like his kindness slowly went down to being an asshole in general, calling me a tramp for once wearing a maid dress at the D&D game, which the party didn't mind, by the way, and actually told me to do so yeah. And for leading him on to thinking that we'd be more than friends, and mentioning that he hoped I was still happy with the abusive Chad boyfriend that he knows very well that he cheats on me. My boyfriend went through a lot of toxic relationships with his exes cheating and using him for money, and I highly trust and love him to the point that I know he isn't cheating on me. I laughed it off and showed my boyfriend the messages, and he told me if I ever see him again to tell him so we can beat him up. After the events, Neckbeard still came to the D&D games, but he made his character like one of those edgy loner characters, saying he can do it on his own and cannot trust anyone in the party, as a certain dark elf bard broke his samurai's heart. He slowly stopped coming to the game, and he didn't really pay much attention to it anyway. Just recently, when we were on the quest for the long journey, my friend Krelith asked my character to sing them a song for the journey, and I replied with, "Alrighty then, here's a story of the sweaty Neckbeard samurai." Well, that was really bad. I don't know if it's the worst, because it's got some pretty stiff competition, but it's still really, really bad. Here's a good rule of thumb. If somebody starts talking about a person being breedable, it's probably a good idea to get out of their immediate radius. It is a pretty massive red flag, and yeah, I have to say, guys, cosplay is not consent. This girl can dress or act like however she pleases. That doesn't mean that this guy is allowed to act the way he does. I don't just mean morally, I mean legally too. It's not like when you read laws and harassment, there's a little asterisk that goes, oh, well, if they're hot enough, then it's actually all good. No, that's not how it works. Harassment is never okay, period, full stop. How she continued playing with this guy, that is beyond my comprehension. I mean, seriously, I was sweating while reading the story. It made me kind of nervous. But anyway, I hope everything turned out alright. It's been about a year since this happened, and I am still in awe of what the hell this all was. I've joined an online game of Roll20, and the DM touted it as a very character-focused homebrew. He only wanted 3 players, since he wanted to give all of our characters very heavy roleplay time. This sounded great to me, so I joined up. DM, running a world where we were characters in a magical university city in a desert in a perilous political situation. Myself was playing a Dampier chronologist and archaeologist, a hardcore nerd who turned to vampirism to have more time for his research. My friend played a Genasi monk who just arrived in a traveling circus and was exploring a new city. Entitled, a human warlock who was pretending to be a wizard in the university so she could keep up with her incredibly talented sister and not get disowned. So by session 0, we were all seriously hyped. The world sounds great, the characters sound great. Myself and Entitled were making backstories, tying our characters' backstories together. The DM is delighted at how we're taking his concepts and running with them. It is so cool. Then session 1, and we start to play, and Entitled is silent. Like, does not say anything. Myself and Fran try to pull them in, asking their opinions, but nothing. Short answers or nothing at all. This is our first problem because this is a very RP heavy game with only 2 people actually role-playing. This is draining, but it is fun, and Friend and I are hitting it off great. So hey, maybe Entitled just wants some time to warm up to the game. The first 3 sessions are us exploring an old tomb in a low-level dungeon crawl, and still nothing from Entitled, not a single word. They join in with a few rounds of combat, but otherwise it's just me and Friend trying to keep the game going. We go back to the university city and warn them of an incoming invasion from a neighboring state. Okay, the DM says, now we'll have a session of downtime where everyone's getting prepared. What are your characters doing? And it's like a dam has burst open, and Tyler goes into great detail about what their character is doing with various NPCs, but when our characters meet, they just clam up again. I'm confused by this, so I asked the DM if they'd be willing to allow another player into the game. Intel has been so quiet in RP moments with us, and it's tiring to do group RP with just 2 people. Friend has mentioned a guy he knows who sounds like they would be a great fit. Entitled just says, oh, can we stop doing group roleplay? DM responds, hey, this is a roleplay heavy game. Yes, but we could go off and do our own thing and only do the minimum possible amount of group events. What? Yeah, it would be so much fun if we just didn't interact and just did our own projects, which would maybe sometimes interact with each other. But that's not D&D. That's how I run D&D. I did with my players and it was great. Yeah, but you're not DMing this. Oh, but the DM can totally do this. He just needs to run 1 game for each of us. No, wait, whoa. I'm the DM, and no, I cannot do that. This is literally tripling my workload. No, you can totally do it. It would be a lot more fun than doing everything together. We'd all have our own intrigue and would affect each other, even though we would never meet. I don't want to play that. It would also take forever to get to each of our turns. But it would be so much fun. The DM can totally find a way to balance each other's turns. Yeah, no, I am the DM here, and I don't want to run that. Okay, this isn't the game I thought it was. And she just leaves. What the ever-living hell was that? Alas, despite us inviting Friend's friend to join, the DM seemed to have lost heart with this game, and it ended next session. Luckily, Friend and I went on to join another group together, and have been happily playing together ever since, but the sheer entitlement in demanding the DM to run 3 simultaneous games for each of us just staggered me. They weren't a bad player otherwise, they just couldn't understand that we don't play D&D for some weird solo intrigue game, or that demanding a DM completely change the setup of the session might be a bit of a tall order. I would wager to say that it's not a secret that most DMs need to put in a lot of effort into the campaigns that they run. 1 hour prep equals 1 hour of game time, they say, but for a lot of DMs, it's probably more than that, meaning your DM is putting 5 to 6 hours of work per week into this game. Showing up and engaging in the session is the best thing you can do to show your thanks to what your DM is doing. Now, of course, players are not subservient to their DMs for this. Players aren't peasants waiting upon their lord. Players are allowed to criticize DMs, but you need to be reasonable about it. There's a big gap between, hey DM, I feel like my character is just not getting a lot of time to shine in this campaign, while other characters get extensive roleplay moments. Can you include my character more into the story? There's a big difference between that and literally asking the DM to run 3 separate campaigns. Now, I don't think most people are asking that of their DM, but it's absolutely possible for players to at times overwhelm their DM. I've been a DM who has definitely been overwhelmed with one particular player's criticisms and requests. You can see more about that in my own RPG horror story for 10,000 subscribers. And yeah, it really sucks. We're trying to put on a good game, but when one particular player is overwhelming us with requests, it's really hard to do that and can make D&D anxiety-inducing, which is, well, what's the point of running D&D if you're not having fun as the DM? Don't let that stop you from delivering criticism or asking requests from your DMs, but just make sure that they're reasonable before you put forward such a request. If you guys enjoyed this episode of RPG Horror Stories and you want to let me know, then please do leave a like. If you want to see more of my content, then please do subscribe to Crispy's Tavern. I also do tips and campaign diaries and interviews with other YouTubers, so if you want to see that content, please do subscribe because I got more on the way. And finally, if you want to leave your own stories or thoughts, go down to the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment. The Neckbeard returns to let me know you made it to the end of the video. In essence, like, comment, subscribe. I will see you all next time. Farewell.